And welcome to TelecomTV right here from MEF 16 in Baltimore, Maryland. We're joined by Chris Purdy. He's with CENX, and Chris, the Chief Technology Officer of CENX. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Abe.
Give us a quick overview of CENX and its role in the telecom industry.
We're a telecom software vendor, selling essentially orchestration software, but really more of the assurance side of orchestration has been our focus. We have done a number of cases where we've done the full life cycle, but increasingly, I'd say our role is more in the assurance side. So participation in that whole closed loop assurance, we'd be taking in all of the real-time data from the telecom, mapping it against the topology of that domain, and then feeding back into the orchestration and fulfillment systems to actually affect changes to the network in that controlled loop. So selling primarily to tier 1 service providers.
Chris, there's a lot of talk here at MEF 16 about digital transformation, network transformation. I wanted to ask you what the current state of play, if I can call it that, of the network right now.
I mean, I think still primarily you have massive physical networks out there that are carrying huge numbers of servers, huge installed base, et cetera. And everyone is planning on moving to a virtualized implementation where you're not having the custom built hardware, of course, to NFV. And I think what we're seeing now is that in just about every one of the providers we're working with, they're either going into production with at least one of those VNFs or they're about to. And in some cases, they're actually a significant number that are underway. I think though that there's been a lot of preparation work, a lot of proof of concept, a lot of testing, a lot of feedback, and so I think it could be a bit of a banyan tree where there's been a lot of infrastructure work, and I think we could be starting to see a significant movement towards those NFV in the real production networks in the very near future.
So is the primary challenge in a lot of the discussion here talking about really orchestrating services across not only physical networks, but now virtual networks? Absolutely,
and this is why we've increasingly started focus on the assurance side is that the problem space and a large number of the standards bodies, a large amount of effort has gone in vendors at building what is often called the orchestration, but is really more about the fulfillment side. It's about creation of new virtual machines, spinning up of new VNFs, and integrating those into the networks. Not nearly as much work or energy has gone into the assurance side. And so how do you assure those services across combined physical and virtual networks? And so this is ultimately where we've been investing the vast majority of our intellectual property in our development, and it's been where our biggest deployments are.
You said you've been on a couple panels already at MEF 16. East-West interoperability has been a topic that I've been hearing off and on during the conference. I'm not sure if those are part of your panels, but why is that so important?
In the MEF framework, the East-West essentially means the interfaces between providers, because no one provider can reach everywhere on Earth. And so those providers have to work together in order to reach and deliver services to their full customer base. In fact, I think it was at the last Gen 15 event that I made the comment that I felt that those East-West interfaces were the most important ones for MEF to standardize. And the reason is because a lot of the other interfaces are happening within a service provider, and there's a lot of custom implementations, a lot of proprietary implementations that happen within a provider. But the interactions between providers is absolutely must become standardized, or else it's not possible to set up connections and take down connections across a large base of providers, because when everyone has a unique service definition, everyone has a unique ordering interface, everyone has a unique way of sectionalizing services and assuring them, it just can't possibly scale or work at speed.
I wanted to ask you, and you brought this up just a second ago, about some of the challenges in this transition to virtual network services, specifically for service providers. And I know that this show years ago was really revolving around vendors. Now it's service providers as well, and also certified professionals as well. But for SPs, what are the challenges during this transition?
Virtualization that comes in makes it a lot harder to assure your services. Before, things were very deterministic on physical boxes. Now what's happening, of course, is the VNFs are going across a shared compute infrastructure. And I think there are really two major ways that it makes it more complex. The first is that historically, whatever the function that particular network element did was on the same box, and so it was all tightly tied together. So if a failure occurred or issues occurred, it would be on that box, and it was very clear. Now what happens is there's an underlying compute infrastructure that's a shared resource for a large number of VNFs. And the mapping of those VNFs to the compute infrastructure is absolutely a very significant challenge. If you've ever looked at data centers, we are a big application with many components that runs in a virtualized environment. And the number of times where we've had degradation in the performance of our application because of underlying compute issues, underlying storage issues, or underlying network issues. And they're very difficult to sectionalize, they're very difficult to understand, and it causes this degradation in the application. So that's what's going to be the first big challenge, is how do I essentially understand an SLA between the whole compute, storage, and network infrastructure in the NFVI and make sure the VNF is getting what it needs to be successful, so you can sectionalize those problems. The second way that it adds complexity is that any one NFV domain will be delivering up VNFs of many different types. So I might be delivering a firewall to my IPVPN service, and I might be delivering a virtual EPC to my mobile core, and I might be delivering a virtual X gateway to my mobile private network. So I've got many different network domains in a service provider, and each of those network domains is now going to have a network topology which consists both of physical network elements and virtual network functions to deliver an end-to-end service. And so the complexity of sectionalizing troubles in that environment with combined physical and virtual is absolutely one of the greatest challenges the service providers face. And it's an area where we have invested significantly.
Chris, I also wanted to ask you about CENX's role in this coalescence or convergence between standards or standardization and open initiatives. How are you playing a role in that?
It's fascinating the way this is all happening, and I think watching Pascal's discussion this morning about how the MEF is really trying to take even an agile approach to standards, which is very important. We've been an agile vendor for a long time, but it's interesting when we sell to the big service providers, we often, agile develop the product and then head to a waterfall when it comes to putting it into production. So there's a lot of change that has to happen. But I think that there has to be a much tighter working relationship between the standards bodies and the open source community. It has to happen in an agile way, evolutionary way. I think I do personally have some concerns that when you do these things incrementally, you don't step back and do the high-level design enough to make sure that you got your framework right, you have your information models right, and instead it's constant evolution. But unfortunately, that is the world that we find ourselves in. And so I think some people just have to step back and think about it, and others have to keep going. And it's going to be an interesting world, because it's certain that we're not going to come to lockdown standards that survive long periods of time. I think we're just going to see continuous evolution.
Chris Purdy with CENX, thanks for being with TelecomTV.
Good. Yep. Thank you, babe.
Thank you.